God, I know I haven't talked to you in a while. Can you just bear with me? You know my friend Danny, the one who was taking those drugs? What am I saying? You know everything. And you must know he died this morning from an overdose. I just wanted to tell you how I felt then and, well, how I feel now. When he was taking those drugs, he scared me and he hurt me a couple of times. Well, I sort of understood why he was taking those drugs. He said he had a lot of problems. He said he wanted to escape, you know, run away. But I saw him the day before he died. It looked like he took a crash from a 747. Well, the next morning he overdosed from heroin. Well, and it made me feel even worse than ever. I mean, I could have helped him and I didn't. I know it's not my fault, but why do I feel so guilty? Maybe it's not guilt, maybe it's helplessness. But as the saying goes, some days you live, some days you survive, some days you exist, some days you survive. I guess Danny didn't do anything.
Reimer, and welcome to Dead Air Live's portrait of three visionaries working with Boston's teenagers. In the next hour, my co-host John Lapham and I will be talking with three very energetic and thoughtful people who spend their days working directly with teenagers, helping them to create and pursue their own visions. In the studio with me now is Charlie Rose, who is Director of Youth Outreach Programs for the City of Boston. But I want to let you know that in the next hour we'll also be speaking with Reverend Bruce Wall, who has recently taken his ministry to the streets of Roxbury. And after that I'll be speaking with Shoshana Rosenfeld, who is the Adolescent AIDS Coordinator for the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. So Charlie, maybe we could begin by your talking about the videotape footage that we just saw as an introduction to this show. I know it was footage from the second annual Youth Congress, but maybe you could talk about how that particular effort is an example of your larger programmatic goals.
Sure. Well, the piece we just saw was a part of the performance troupe that really kicked off the Youth Congress. So Michael Persichini, the young man who performed the piece, wrote it himself, and it was really to bring out issues that face teenagers every day. The Youth Congress is an attempt to bring together teenagers from all across the city of Boston to give them the opportunity to let the policymakers, the mayor, the police commissioner, the head of different offices through the city of Boston that determine youth programs, what the teens want. Oftentimes, money is spent on youth programs with no input from teenagers, and the Youth Congress is an attempt for the adults to listen and learn from the teens themselves.
How seriously do the adults really listen?
Well, that was the second annual Youth Congress. The mayor, in his State of the City address, referred to the Youth Congress. He asked parents to bring young people to the television set the night he did his speech. I think that it's hard, and adults are resistant because they think they know it all, but they're realizing that teenagers have a lot to offer, that teens with an organized voice can make a difference. And the teenagers are realizing that somebody is listening. And I think we're taking steps in the right direction. The next Youth Congress is coming up April 29th at UMass.
And is anyone welcome to attend?
Open to any teenager in the city of Boston. We're expecting 500 to 600 teens.
Really? And are the teenagers already chosen who will be performing?
The performance troupe is forming now. We have a core group of about 10 people, not professional actors or actresses, who've come together. They're rehearsing, writing, and performing their own skits on teen issues, rap, songs, dances, and anybody's welcome to join the performance troupe and, in fact, join the organizing committee for the Youth Congress to help pull the whole thing off.
Do you have a sense now as to what kinds of issues are priorities for them, what they will be addressing in this Youth Congress?
Well, what we've done is done a survey of approximately now 600 teenagers in the city to ask them what are the top issues facing teens today. And the results, actually, we were counting some of them up this afternoon. The results I've seen, the top issues are drugs and alcohol, AIDS, sexuality, racism, teen violence and weapons, and education, I believe, family problems. There's a number of issues. My personal opinion is that a lot of those things are related, and that what the Congress is really doing is getting teenagers to have some input on all of those issues. They are going to select 5 or 6 top issues and come up with a youth platform for the city.
Oh, that really is terrific. I guess what I'm a little bit confused by then is, how do you take each of these concerns of the kids and design other programs? I assume that that's part of your job as an outreach program director.
Yeah, part of what we're doing is, through the Youth Congress, we come up with the youth platform from the teams. Then it's a one-day event, and there's a lot of attention, a lot of TV cameras, and the Boston Globe comes. But in one day, you can't make all the changes we want to make. This is a long-term effort, and the Youth Congress is an ongoing thing. We're going to look at what's happened in the last year since the last Youth Congress, and we have to follow up on it, and we have to have an action plan coming out of the Congress. The idea of the youth outreach program is that we're building youth organizations. We're giving young people an opportunity to become leaders. A lot of people say youth are the leaders of tomorrow. They're the leaders of the future. And while that may be true, I cringe every time I hear it, because my opinion is youth are the leaders of today. And don't sell them short by saying they're the leaders of tomorrow. We need to help them have opportunities to be leaders. We need to train them on how to, on leadership skills, and we need to put them in the spotlight. And the Youth Congress does that. The Youth Outreach Program is doing that, and we're building large youth-run organizations throughout the city of Boston.
I'd love to hear about just one of these programs in particular that you're working on now that's exciting to you, that addresses one of the priorities of concerns for kids today.
Well, let me talk about a local event that's going to happen, and we do events all the time, dances, talent shows, trips, all kinds of things designed to draw young people in. We do workshops on a whole range of issues. But on March 17th, there's a group in Roxbury. Our Roxbury group is called the Roxbury Teen Time Troopers, and it's an area that gets a lot of negative publicity, where teenagers are all involved in drugs and violence and crime, and that's the image that's projected. These young people, there's about 40 or 50 coming to weekly meetings, organizing a dinner, dance, and show. It's called Stop the Madness and Join the Gladness. It's going to be run by teenagers. There's going to be a banquet dinner that they're serving and organizing. There's going to be a show, One Nation and Young Nation, and a number of other the performance troupe from the Youth Congress will be there. A number of other performances will happen, and then there'll be a party at the end. The idea is that, and we're expecting to have 200 to 300 teenagers from the Roxbury area and from throughout the city. That's just one small example of something positive young people can do. It's kind of join our gang. We have something to offer, and coming out of that, we're going to invite teens to become part of the Roxbury Teen Time Troopers and to join that organization, which is a place that they can meet other friends, they can take on leadership roles, they can feel good about themselves. It's open to everybody. It's not stigmatized for troubled or at-risk youth. It's open to everyone.
What impresses me in your describing this is that you have been able to get so many kids from any community together for an event like this, and I wondered if you found that there's a snowball effect that takes place, that the kids get excited and get other kids involved, so that they realize that there isn't a stigma attached, that it's cool to, say, be a part of this kind of effort. So my question, I guess, is how much of this is the kids getting other kids involved, and how much of this is you're spending your hours each day, out there in the streets, informing their parents or their teachers about this kind of an event? Well,
it's a combination. I mean, there's no question that teenagers, the snowball effect you talk about, and you hit the nail on the head when you talk about teens getting other teens involved and it becoming the cool thing to do. When we started in certain communities, nobody wants to go to a meeting. Basically, we all go to too many meetings, and the meetings are not really that cool. But if you make it a fun thing and it becomes, the Teen Time Troopers or the Charlestown Teen Connection becomes the place to be, then everybody wants to join. I would also say, though, that it's key to have people going out onto the streets, into the parks, playgrounds, street corners, housing developments, where young people congregate, where they want to hang out, and relating to them on a one-to-one level. I do it through basketball. I play basketball all over the city, and I relate to people that way. Other people have their own methods, but we have a team of street workers and youth workers that actually go out onto the streets and draw in kids, build relationships. One thing we find is that young people really want someone who cares about them, to show them some attention and to tell them that we love them and that we care about them and that there are places to go, safe places to go, where you don't have to be worried about problems or violence or other things. And we also set up conditions that make it easier for them to get to know one another and relate to each other.
Well, as I hear you talk, I realize that your efforts are to meet the concerns of all teenagers in Boston. And I know that recently the media has picked up on the term youth at risk. And I guess I've always had this concern that money would be allocated for a select group of kids. I'm not exactly sure which this group is, but this group at risk. And in that sense would end up depriving quote-unquote normal kids from those services and growth. And I wondered if you had run into that kind of dilemma in administering your own program, if money is set aside for, let's say, potential dropouts, and how you balance out, you know, a message for the select group, which I think could end up really benefiting everybody.
Well, first of all, I have a problem with all the terminology and labeling people in certain groups, troubled, at risk, you know, whatever. And I think that is something that's happening. There's not enough money to go around for any of those programs. The resources from the federal level on down are minuscule compared to the needs. But what we do, frankly, is we go after all of that money and we shape what we're doing to fit into whatever the guidelines are. I think, though, there is, you know, a lot of effort and well-meaning effort, well-placed effort in some ways to work with youth at risk. I think all youth are at risk for the most part, and it doesn't matter if you're from a low-income minority community or whether you live in Newton. There's still certain needs and things you need in your life, and there are different levels of at risk and different variation of needs, but we really need to take a serious look at the level of resources, because from the federal level it's pathetic, and it's really causing a crisis throughout the country, and Boston is one city that you see the effect, but many other cities throughout the country.
Well, given that crisis, how do you effectively help these kids become visionaries, have a sense of hope, dream, etc.?
Well, I think that given the opportunity to be a leader, to get up on stage, to talk in front of a group of people and introduce others and make a speech, to be running a teen meeting for 20 people, to get on TV, to organize a ball hockey league or a basketball league in your neighborhood, to get your name in the paper for positive things, to help another youth, to bring in a young person who's in trouble, who might live down the hall from you, who you know has problems in the home, and take them away from some of the negative temptations. There's so many things to be hopeful about. There's so much good stuff happening. You don't read about it in the paper. Doesn't sell many papers or make much headlines. The gang problems, you know, that gets on TV all the time. But when you do something that's sort of positive in a group, it doesn't get on TV. But I think that we're creating safe places for teenagers to come. We're giving them the opportunity to be leaders, and they are leaders, and that feels good. You want to take control of your life. You want to feel good about your life, and it's not just us, but there's a lot of organizations. You're going to talk to people later in the show, Bruce Wall and other organizations throughout the city that are doing a lot of this kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of hope. I think the community-based network is there, and I think in Boston the political will is there. I think unfortunately the resources are not there to really make the impact we want to have.
Well, speaking of those resources, I wonder if you have a sense of, let's say, how schools might be suppressing or encouraging these kids to have visions.
Oh, I think, you know, it's very easy in Boston to take a swing at the school department, and it's very easy to sort of generalize about what's happening in the school department. I think that it's a mixed bag. I think there are teachers in classrooms who are encouraging young people to dream and helping them fulfill their dreams. I think there are programs in the schools that are doing that. I think that a lot more work needs to be done. I think there's some obstacles within the department itself, but I think that the schools are a vehicle because you have that audience there, and it's a really important place. And I would encourage them to continue and to encourage all young people to try and fulfill those dreams.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, you know, I realize that you do have a working relationship with a number of different agencies, and certainly with the City of Boston. What kind of political constraints prevent you from focusing on, we'll say, quote-unquote, real issues facing teens in the city?
You know, I work for the City of Boston. I also work for an agency within the city that is community-based, nonprofit, and so I straddle both worlds. In addition, we're out on the street, so we're really bringing those three worlds together. I haven't found political constraints to be a major problem for me. Now, I get a lot of support from the mayor, and the program does from the mayor, but you know, I'm sure there are people who cringe at certain times when certain things happen. I try not to spend a lot of time worrying about that. We have so much to do that you try not to, and you try to, obviously, and you hope that you don't get the phone call that says, you know, what were you doing and what is that about? But that hasn't happened. It's been 4 years. I think people are genuinely interested in making a change.
Well, we only have a few more minutes, but I wanted to ask you what your vision for organizing youth in the next 5 to 10 years is.
Well, that's a good question. You know, despite the constraints I see, I always encourage people to go for their vision. Cesar Chavez always said that, don't tell me why it can't be done, tell me how you're going to do it. I guess what I see is a real strengthening of the network. I see youth workers in every neighborhood who work on the streets. I see teenage peer leaders who are paid staff that work within. I see youth council organizations all over the city. I see a fleet of vans to provide the transportation and the access. I see a citywide organization of people from all neighborhoods helping each other out, multiracial, multi-ethnic. I see getting the young people in on the development boom of Boston, and maybe a downtown youth activity center with conference space, theater, maybe a health clinic, you know, a place for the ministries. I see youth-run businesses coming out of that center. I could go on and on, really, in terms of a vision. I see youth really being established as a part of the policy-making branch of city government. I see, you know, a lot of resources directed in the right direction, and I see us trying to make a difference federally in directing resources out of certain areas and into that.
Well, thank you. What a roadmap you've provided us. That's terrific, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We're next going to be seeing a little bit more video footage of the 2nd Annual Youth Congress, and then John Lapham, my co-host, will be meeting with Reverend Bruce Wall. So let's look at the tape now.
First thing I can remember when I was a little girl in the yard, I had fallen down and scratched my knee and came in crying. I was hoping my father would comfort me, but instead, he beat me. You see, I had torn my new dress. I'm 15 years old and I've been abused ever since I can remember. My mother sees what she wants to see. My mother, she doesn't, I don't think she really cares about me. She sees it, but she doesn't. You know what I mean. I remember asking once, why does Daddy beat me? She said he does it because he loves you. I remember thinking, if that's what love is, I don't want any. That's when I decided to run away. I guess I was about 12 then. I've been passed from foster home to foster home. I've been scared and frightened. I like to live with a real relative, so none of my mother's or father's family want to take me in. And I always thought they loved me as if I was theirs. I am really alone. No one really cares about me. Sometimes I sit and I think, what it'd be like to have someone who really loved me. I mean, really loved me. I feel so alone.
Hi, I'm John Lapham. In this segment of the program, I'll be talking to Reverend Bruce Wall. He was one of the founders of the very successful Drop a Dime Report Crime program in Boston, and now he's taken his ministry from an established position as the minister of youth with the 12th Baptist Church in Roxbury. Now he's taken his ministry to the streets and finding kids who need support there. Hi, Bruce. The first question I had for you is, how did you decide to change your ministry from an established church organization to bring the Word of God out to where you're taking it now?
I've been serving at 12th Baptist Church for 15 long years, and I'm also the clerk magistrate, first assistant clerk at the Boston Juvenile Court, also for 15 years. And I've been watching the number of young people coming into the courthouse, and I see daily the limitations that the system has to offer these young people. We can prosecute them, we can incarcerate them, we can provide counseling services. But I live in the Mattapan section of the community, and I would travel home and see the same young people who sat before me in the juvenile court struggling in the streets. And I knew that it was time for me to leave the church, because in my particular church I had 7 other people who were working with me with youth ministry, and there were 7 other people who could work with these young people. So I believed that the Lord was leading me from the pulpit, from the church, from an exciting youth group that became my family, my crew, and I decided that the Lord was leading me out to the community.
So where did the Lord lead you specifically?
Well, 3 blocks away from my home, there was a skating rink, and it had a reputation of being a very tough place. And I figured that if I was committed to working with young people, to sharing with them about my Christian faith, and wanting to see some of these young people's lives changed, I should take the faith that I preach about every Sunday and walk into the skating rink. And I did that.
Find them right where they were.
I decided to go on their turf. But I thought when I went on their turf that I would be able to command their respect, that they would treat me the way the church kids treated me, that I could say something and they would move the same way I'd say it in the court system. And the day I jumped on the microphone to talk with the young people, they told me to get off of the microphone and put the music back on, and then I felt I was in over my head.
So you really had to change your tune a little bit and find out how to speak to them directly. Can you talk a little bit about how you took what you already knew from your work with the church and put it in?
I essentially had to earn the right to be heard. It wasn't enough that Reverend Bruce Wall was going to Chevu. I had to earn the right to be heard. I had to go to Chevu. I had to hang around for a while. I was going into the skating room where they keep the skates, and when the young people were through skating, they would give me the skates. I would put it on the shelf. I was cleaning up. I was putting cans into the trash can. So I did everything I could do to just be an everyday person. And then I began to reach out to young people and began to ask them why do they come to Chevu. And then I was led to start a Sunday Bible school class at a skating rink. And people were saying, Bruce, if you want to attract young people, you can't call it a Sunday Bible school. They'll never come out. And I figured I needed to be honest with these young people as to what my reason was for being there. So we started a Sunday Bible school.
Has it been successful?
Well, the first day we showed up at Chevu, a little over 11 weeks ago, the owner didn't even show up to open the gates. And so we sat in the car and we had Bible study with 2 teenagers. And 11 weeks later, we have 26 people attending the Sunday school class. The kids are there. Some young people are taking taxi cabs to Sunday school class. Last Sunday we started a youth group. In a few weeks we're going to be starting a tutorial program. And I have been overwhelmed at the response of young people to having the Word of God taught to them at their level. And also seeing these street-hep young people, some are members of youth gangs and some are just everyday kids, bringing their friends into a place that's become a very safe family and a place that they want to be a part of.
You talk a lot about families and setting up family, a sense of family for the youth. How you're bringing in a sense of a Christian identity and a relationship with Jesus to replace what they've been involved with that hasn't been working in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Last Sunday in the Sunday school class, we were talking about the Sunday school lesson was "Come and Join My Gang," and I talked to the young people about the different types of family. There's the family at home, there's the family at school, there's the family in the street, and there's a family at Chez Vous. And I began to talk to these young people about the Chez Vous family beginning to really change. And no longer were the youth gangs dominating Chez Vous or trying to intimidate the owner or coming to Chez Vous and wanting to rumble, but that Chez Vous was becoming a family, a community. Those young people, I said to them, you do not need to jump into the streets and use your guns and use your knives. We're developing a family here that's going to help young people to change their lives around. It worked in the church, in the black church. That same concept worked in the black church. That same concept is working at a secular agency.
Right. So what are you learning in terms of, you're working with, you've chosen not only a place that's out on the streets, but it can be a dangerous place. How do you feel, you've made that choice, do you feel like it's an important choice to make?
I think it's an important choice for me to make, but not only have I made it, Georgette Watson, Drop a Dime, drops in every once in a while. A number of the members of the community are coming up to Chez Vous. Church members are coming up to Chez Vous. Liz Walker has committed to come to Chez Vous. Lynn Dawson of the Boston Patriots. There's a big focus now on Chez Vous because of what's happening there. It's become a model, I understand. And so these young people are seeing all of these adults coming up and expressing concern for them. Lynn Dawson said to me that he's been traveling so much in the suburban network and working with those young people, going from one school to another. He and his wife finally want to have a hands-on with a group of young people. And so he's going to identify Chez Vous as the place that he pours his life into. And these young people are responding to this. Mm-hmm. And I thought that these young people were very hard, very tough. Some of them are using drugs. Some of them have been physically, sexually abused. Some of them have very low self-esteem. Some of them can't read, they can't write. Some of them I see at juvenile court. But it's amazing to see these young people. I took a group of them out to a pizza shop last Sunday for the first time. It was amazing to sit in the pizza shop and have the young people come up to me with other young people around them and say, Mr. Wall, I've memorized the Bible verse that you taught me in the Sunday school. Can I say it to you? And to see kids freely talking about Scripture, see these kids beginning to conform to a certain standard of acceptable social behavior is really exciting. And if we can take this model of Chez Vous and plant a Sunday school class at the Roxbury YMCA, at the Roxbury Boys and Girls Club, and at the Lena Park Community Center, at the Dorchester YMCA, we would begin to see young kids not only loved and challenged, but loved and challenged from a moral and spiritual perspective. And that's where I think these young people need to change.
Mm-hmm. So you see a real role for not just your ministry, but the organized church throughout Boston and other cities taking a really strong role in making this happen.
In just about 3 weeks, every parachurch group and leader in the city of Boston will be coming together to meet at the Emmanuel Gospel Center in the South End. We're going to eyeball each other, find out what the different groups are doing in the streets in Mission Hill and Roxbury and Dorchester and South Boston and Charlestown. And then we're going to call in all of the churches that have youth pastors and youth leaders, and we're going to network the parachurch and the churches, and we're going to sponsor a major Christian youth rally at the Chez Vous roller skating rink. And I'm very excited about that because you're going to see 300 young people jammed into Chez Vous with Len Dawson and Liz Walker challenging them to change their lives. And it's becoming a model, and the churches are finally saying that maybe they need to take a look at leaving their places, their pulpits, and coming to where these kids are.
That's going to be really exciting, I bet. What kind of city support from the city, the work that you're doing these days, how do you see ways you can get working together with them?
I'm hoping that people like Charlie Rose and I can begin to talk all the more. I'm working full-time in the courthouse during the day, so it's difficult for me to network during the day with those who are on the streets. So it's basically working in the evening and on the weekends when my wife says I can go out to the streets. But I'm hoping to work with Charlie Rose and others to see if we can begin to talk and see, hopefully, the development of an agency, as Charlie mentioned this evening, a Youth Activities Commission. The city needs a youth czar, somebody that's identifiable as the chief spokesperson for young people in this city, somebody who can network with the courts and the schools and the neighborhood centers, somebody who can have a staff of youth workers who are going to be in the streets, not just 9 to 5, but in the streets from 5 to 12 and to 1, that will be all over the city of Boston and being the eyes and ears of the city administration and the state, bringing the resources of the city and the state right to the needs of these young people. I'm hoping that that will happen.
That's great. I was interested, in terms of bringing your religious understanding, your relationship to God, you've talked to me about bringing that the work with the youth really starts with getting them to have a relationship with Jesus, and that being, instead of bringing them, perhaps the first thing being a drug program or whatever, you bring that to them. How do you see that working?
I am convinced that, even in my own experience, when I was on the streets, being a young rebellious teenager during the 60s, it wasn't until I personally gave my life over to the Lord Jesus Christ that on the inside I began to change. And we can offer these young people tutorial programs, and we can offer them a basketball league, and we can offer them just about anything that our resources have to offer. But unless these young people on the inside of their lives change spiritually, and we talk about this in the class, and the young people are now recognizing the old nature and the new nature, the old self and the spiritual self, and we talk about that. And I'm challenging young people to recognize that they need a personal relationship with God. God has a special plan and a purpose for them, and it's just not to be locked up in some jail snorting cocaine. But it's a special plan, and I've worked with young people who have made a decision to give their lives to Christ. I've got one with me right now who wears the Raiders cap, and the Raiders cap is a signal that he's a part of the Humboldt gang. And but his life is changing on the inside, and these young people are going to their friends and talking about a change on the inside. And once these kids really begin to change, there's no secret what they can do in this community and helping their peers.
Mm-hmm. You've said that you work with, when you're working in the roller skating rink, for instance, you work with the good kids, you also work with the bad kids. What are you learning specifically about working with kids who are in gangs, kids who are in a group where it's cool to be bad or it's cool to be tough, whatever?
First of all, I'm learning that I have an awful lot to learn. Mm-hmm. I'm learning that I need to learn the language of these young people. I'm still asking young people that I work with to interpret the language and the body language to me. I had a couple members of the Humboldt gang come to the skating rink a couple Friday nights ago. And they came to the skating rink with their lookout standing on the front, looking to see if the Giants were there and looking to see if the Walk Hill or Interville group was there. They came only to talk to me about one of the leaders of the gang. They're fearful that with the shooting and the fighting that one of them is going to die. And they're saying, we want help. I had a mother bring a young person to see me yesterday, and she didn't know this, but he told me that he's a part of the gang in the Carbon Square area. He's afraid that he's going to die. Most of these young people who have this facade of, I'm tough, I'm carrying my gun, most of these young people are afraid. And they basically are saying they're carrying weapons to just protect themselves. But once you get past all that veneer, that front, you're finding a kid who wants to be loved, and a kid who wants to have somebody put their arm around them. And I've seen young people, hard, tough young people, melt when you express the love in a very tangible way. And so what am I finding out? I'm finding out that if we care, if we spend the time with these young, I'm 40 years old, mm-hmm. and I'm rolling on the floor with teenagers. But they respect that, and they say that I'm the newest member of the Chevu family, and they hope that I'll be around for a while, and the kids are respecting me. And so I think something's going to happen.
And the management as well is really happy you're there, I bet.
The management's happy I'm there, and I'm happy I'm there because I had a young teenager come up to Shaverville last Friday, and she was skating, and she said, "Bruce, the atmosphere here has really changed. I can't believe it." She felt safe. And in 11 weeks, the owner and a number of us have been able to turn Shaverville around to become a real family.
Can you speak, just so we've got a couple more minutes, how much translation, you've been learning the language of the kids, the body language of the kids. How much translation does what you know from Scripture, how much translation do you need when you're working, to get them to relate to it?
I thought that I would have to learn a whole new vocabulary, and that's not true. Can you imagine a skating rink that's closed on Sunday mornings? It doesn't open until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 or 4. A skating rink where young people are coming to a Sunday Bible school class on Sunday mornings, all by themselves. And they're coming out to be given their own individual Bibles that they write their names in with paper and pencil, taking notes and listening to me rap about the Lord. And I haven't compromised about it. I'm giving them Bible verses. They're memorizing John 3:16, John 14:6, where Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." I'm teaching kids how to live their lives. So I'm not learning a new language in that regard. I'm just speaking the Scripture, and I'm making application to their very lives. And to see these kids responding, to see them smile, to see them in their dungarees on Sunday morning. This coming Sunday, I'm taking them to my church, 12th Baptist, where my church is going to commission me to be a missionary to young people in the city of Boston. And all of the young people that I've been working with over the last past 11 weeks, are coming to church to sit with me and experience that. So there's not a whole lot of translation. You just go for the hearts of these young people, and they respond.
And it's working for you.
It's working.
Well, we're out of time for this segment of the show. Thank you very much for coming, and good luck with what you're doing. It seems to be working really well. In the next segment, before Avery will be back to speak with Shoshana Rosenfeld about her work educating teenagers about AIDS in the state of Massachusetts. And right now we'll go to a video clip of Shoshana talking with a Malden High School student assembly about protecting themselves from AIDS.
I'm here to talk about information that can save your life, literally, and to talk about options for healthy decision-making and options that can literally save your life. Because AIDS prevention isn't just about condom use. I would say that in this room, or in any typical group of teenagers, about 40 to 50% of you are sexually active. And about 50 to 60% of you are not. And I would say that, and this is my value, but I would say that I promote people, teenagers, waiting until they become sexually active. And I wanted to identify that as my value because in this information that we're going to be discussing today, people have lots of different values or opinions about lots of this information. And that everybody is entitled to their values, but I hope that you would keep an open mind about the information that we discuss. And to know that you're just figuring out your values. You're figuring out who you are in the world and where you stand on issues, that your values may be the same or different from your parents, or the same or different from religious leaders, or the same or different even from your friends, and that this is a time for you to be figuring out where you stand and to try on different values and to try on different ways of approaching the world. Now, let me take a quick poll here. How many people in this room think that they could never ever get AIDS? Well, that's very impressive that not very many of you raised your hand. And thanks for the people who did. When I would ask that question a year ago, everybody in the audience would raise their hand. And I think the fact that you didn't is a tribute to the kind of education and the kind of programs you have here at Malden. I'm very, very impressed with the work that's being done around health issues in this school. Most teenagers don't think that they are at risk for getting AIDS. Now, the fact is that it's what you do, not who you are, that causes infection with the virus, right? And that there is a time lag between when somebody gets infected with the AIDS virus till when they get sick, which can be as long as 12, 13, 14, even 15 years. So that you, as teenagers, and the freshmen being younger and the seniors being older, you won't be seeing people your age with AIDS, but you will be seeing your peers when you're in your 20s. Now that's the bad news. The good news is that there's a lot of things that you can do to protect your health.
And welcome back to the studio. I'm now joined by Shoshana Rosenfeld, who is the Youth and AIDS Coordinator for the Department of Public Health for the state of Massachusetts. It's a huge job that you've got here. You're responsible for educating our youth about AIDS. Where in the world do you begin?
I guess, well, I started by educating myself and learning. I continue to learn as much as I can about AIDS on a medical level, but also on a psychological level, and health behavior and behavior change, and about young people, and about how to help other adults become comfortable enough with the information so that they can actually do the education and do the work. I think the work is most effective when it's supported by lots of people, and particularly those people who are closest to each other.
How do you then help adults realize the risk that is really there for teens to catch AIDS? And also then how do you help teenagers realize that risk?
That's a really good question, because the numbers don't pan out around AIDS and HIV infection among teenagers. Actually, in the age group between 13 and 19 in the United States, less than 1% of those cases are among teens. If you look at the 20 to 29 age group, it jumps up to 21%. Now, what's that jump all about? Well, a lot of people forget that the virus can live in the human body for a long, long time before somebody gets sick. So the folks in their 20s who are coming down with symptoms of HIV infection, HIV disease, or AIDS, most likely got infected when they were young people, when they were in their teenage years. So what we need to do is really focus on the behaviors that are going on among teens now and help them to reduce their risk.
I know when I was a teenager, I thought nothing would ever happen to me, you know, that I was going to live forever, that not a problem would face me. I just wonder how difficult an idea this is to translate to kids, because as you say, the problem will not reach them until they're in their 20s. And you know, if they could see that their peers at age 13, 14, 15 were getting AIDS, would that have been, you know,
well,
a clearer signal? I mean, I guess it would, unfortunately.
Right. Fortunately, that's not happening. But when we look at other communities and what's been effective in helping communities of people to take precautions and reduce their risk around getting infected with the virus, the gay community, for example, in San Francisco, gay men were losing dozens of friends and lovers before they really believed that the problem could happen to them, that they could get sick and die. And it was the message about using condoms that was delivered by their peers, actually, which I think eventually hit home and turned the tide. And now the rate of new infection among that community is actually 0%. Now, teens are never going to see their peers, or very few of them are going to see their peers really sick and dying from AIDS. I think one of the best things that we can offer, we can offer a lot, but one really powerful thing to do is to set up a situation where young people can actually interact and talk with someone living with AIDS. It's very amazing to watch kids or teens who feel like it could never happen to them, or you know, it happens to somebody else. After listening to and talking with someone and asking questions, how the whole attitude changes. And
how could somebody who is watching this show, let's say a concerned parent or a teacher who agrees with you that in fact it really might make sense if their classroom or if their children or neighborhood of children could meet some afternoon with a person or several people with AIDS, how would they go about doing that? Is there somebody that could call? Or?
There's a speakers bureau of people living with AIDS at the AIDS Action Committee, and I've actually been involved and will be involved in training people specifically around what are the best strategies and what can you expect when you talk with teenagers. Teens are wonderful in that they will just ask whatever's on their mind, whereas adults usually hold back a little more. But someone could call the AIDS Action Committee and ask for the Speakers Bureau coordinator.
That's great. I do know that we have the phone number, so eventually during the show we'll have that up on the screen for viewers. Speaking, you know, more specifically, I guess, about educating teenagers, I wonder if in your work throughout the state, how you have assessed the emotional state of teenagers. How open are they to learning about AIDS and AIDS prevention, given how serious and overwhelming the nature of the issue is? I could imagine some teenagers would simply shut down because it is just too much to deal with. How eager are they to learn? And
well, I think the receptivity of young people to learning about AIDS has a lot to do with the adult or the individual who brings the information and the message and the time. And as the two guests before me talked about, just really letting teens know that you care about them, that you want to listen, that you respect them, that you want to talk about their problems and their issues with them, and then helping them to take on roles of leadership and tell each other about things. And I think that teens really are concerned if they don't sense that you're willing to go through it with them and help them figure out how they're going to actually protect themselves. And it's a very complex set of activities that we're asking people to do when it comes to reducing their risk. If they're not convinced that you're in it with them to help them really make the change, I don't think that they'll show their concern to you. So it has a lot to do with approach and respect and caring.
Are there tips that you would give adults in terms of beginning that conversation with teenagers?
Sure. I think one of the first things for an adult to do is to begin dealing with their own fears and feelings about AIDS, because those are going to come across. And it's okay to have them, but I think people need to know what they are. If, for example, you yourself were really concerned that you were infected with the AIDS virus and you went into a classroom or were even doing a small group presentation with students, and you didn't acknowledge that fear to yourself first, it would really come across. Or if you were concerned that one of the teens in the room was infected and that you could get infected just by sitting in the same room with them. And as silly as that sounds, people are still concerned about casual contact and casual transmission. So to look at your own issues, to look at how you feel about gay and lesbian teens and homophobia and IV drug use and talking about sex. And it's okay to feel uncomfortable as long as you've acknowledged that to yourself and you're willing to be open with that with the young people. As I said, respecting teens is really, really important. I think skill development is absolutely key, that we can't just say, use condoms if you're sexually active. First we need to say, do you want to be sexually active? And how do you go about deciding whether you want to be sexually active or not, and then communicating that to another person? I think that we need to look at the amount of sexual abuse and sexual assault that goes on. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 7 boys reportedly are sexually abused by the age of 18. Now, we know that sexual abuse has a tremendous impact on how one views their own sexuality and their whole self-image and self-esteem and power in the world. So particularly for young women, to be able to express what they want or what they don't want in a sexual relationship and actually follow through with that is a big challenge. So we need to help teens develop skills. Okay, let's say you decide you want to be sexually active. You know who you want your sexual partner to be, and then you know, okay, I need to use condoms. Well, how do you go about getting the condoms? You talk to a lot of young people, they're not going to go into a drugstore to get condoms. We're trying to start up field trips to take teens to the local drugstore on a condom investigating outing to look at all the different brands and what there is and what the differences are. And
I would imagine that that field trip would be equally important for adults to feel comfortable.
I think so.
doing.
I think so. It's a good point.
Yeah. In describing this, I'm aware, I guess, of some learning differences between young men and women. And I wondered if in some of your conversations with teens, if you find that your teaching style is gender specific.
That's something that I've been thinking about more and more. I think that it really needs to be on some level. I'm not necessarily advocating that we separate young men and women to do AIDS education, but we need to take into consideration things that are affecting teens' lives. And I think the life of a young male teen is very different from the life of a young female teen. And as I was listening to Charlie and to Bruce talk about, you know, being out on the basketball courts. Well, who's out on the courts? It's the guys who are in there feeling powerful, working up a sweat, shooting hoops, and the girls are sitting on the side talking about which guy they're going to go out with and who they're seeing and are they going to have sex with him and what do they think about this and that. I think there's a whole power dynamic that goes on.
Are there ways in which you would advise adult women in the audience to join with some of those teen girls who are, you know, on the outside of the basketball court? I think men are given the message that this is a way to join other young men. You can play sports with them.
Right.
But how do you recommend that we join with the young women?
I think to, again, try to enter into their world and really get a sense of what it's like to be a young teen woman. I remember personally, and I remember it was really, really difficult. And I think that if adult women can get in there and just start talking, you know, it might not be at such an active physical level, but just start talking and making themselves available and accessible to listen. There's a really interesting program that's going on right now in the city of Boston that's been targeted primarily towards women, and a number of people are thinking about restructuring it or modifying it for teens, and it's called the Safety Net Parties. It's based on a Tupperware party, and it actually originated in the gay community. Didn't go over too well with gay men in Boston, went over pretty well in New York City. But what it is that a woman or a young woman, an adolescent woman or a young guy could invite over a group of their friends to their house, and a person who's trained in running the party will come over, and it's maybe 10 or 12 people who know each other, and then they sit around and they talk about risk reduction and AIDS prevention. And you really, you're not just talking about AIDS here, it's a much more comprehensive approach. You're talking about feeling better about yourself, or maybe why you don't feel so good about yourself, and how do you communicate with your sexual partner, and how do you make using condoms more interesting, and there are games like condom relay races and role plays. And
well, if somebody was interested in having this kind of Tupperware party, or what are they, it's a safety net
party.
A safety net party, who would they call? AIDS Action again, or?
They could call the AIDS Action Committee. They could call ABCD in Boston. I know that the Cambridge High School offered to run the parties for the students. I'm not sure how well that's going right now, but I know that it's been talked about, it's available, and it's an idea that's just catching on. But I think that's something that would work well with young women in particular.
I know that a lot of people have the concern that there's all this talk, and is there any action? Our kids, our adults even, really changing their behavior. Do you have a sense of that?
Well, as I said earlier, I think that gay men are changing their behavior. Unfortunately, I think that's because they've really felt a tremendous loss. I'm not sure if teens are changing their behavior yet. In other words, if they're having less sex or using condoms more, basically. A new study just came out that said that more teens reported that they were changing their behavior, but I'm not sure if that's true or if they just know what they're supposed to say now. Right. I think it's really, really difficult. It's a really hard thing to do, and I don't think that we've gone far enough to help young people do it. I think in order to really put our money where our mouth is, we need to make condoms available and accessible for teens, and that means having them everywhere. Now, that could be pretty controversial in the state of Massachusetts. But I think that we're talking about an epidemic that could wipe out a generation if we don't begin really helping teens to make these changes.
What is your vision for the next 5 to 10 years in terms of educating our youth about AIDS?
Well, I think that AIDS education in the most ideal setting, and AIDS prevention work is done in a comprehensive way, where we're giving information, we're helping with skill development, we're helping young people to take leadership, to become peer leaders, peer educators, to teach their friends, to feel better about themselves so that they'll take better care of their bodies. I'd love to see adults projecting a positive image and holding out that expectation for youth rather than holding out the expectation that you don't really want to do this. So I don't have a lot of confidence in you. I think my vision is that adults will have confidence and help teenagers attain those kinds of changes. And I would really love to see condoms accessible and available to teens all over the state, in youth-serving agencies, on those basketball courts, in schools, in school-based clinics.
In about 20 seconds, what is one thing that each viewer could do to help kids protect themselves?
I think if each person who's sitting and watching this show could think about when they were young and think about one adult that they knew that really made a positive, important difference in their life, and think about what it was about that adult that made a difference, and then try to carry that through to a teen in their lives today. I think that'd be really terrific.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of our guests. I'm afraid that's the end of our show. Good evening. My name is Avery Reimer, and this has been Dead Air Live.